the peace deal, Biden or Trump? And he said, Trump.
Right.
I don't know what they expected him to answer, like Trump sitting right there. Okay, gewaltig.
And they really put him on the spot, actually. Whoever asked that question.
I wonder how much of it was pre set up. Okay. Listen, Trump's also entitled to a little bit of a media manipulation.
That's for sure.
Okay, so Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. So yesterday we learned about the tinus that they had on Yoav. So they first wanted to attack him for killing Avner, and for that he had a good point. He said Avner was an expert in accuracy on where to attack, and he could have killed Asael. He didn't have to kill Asael. He could have prevented Asael's assault on him by hurting one of his limbs. He didn't have to kill him. So therefore, Yoav's taina that Avner, to say that Avner was not considered a nirdaf, was sort of accepted. But then there was the taina of why he killed Amasa. And although he claims that Amasa was a Morid b'malchus, the Bezin said he was not a Morid b'malchus. He had a right to delay gathering the people, although David told him to gather them right away, because it says Rak Chazak Famat, and we learn from there that when there's Bidul Torah involved, you don't have to listen to the king immediately. You could wait until there's no Bidul Torah. And the third time that they had, Ayin Yoav, was that he himself was Morid b'malchus, because he himself originally sided and joined the camp of Adoniah, and even that he didn't join Avshalom's camp, Keneged David, that was only because he was afraid of David's power that was still there, but he would have joined. So there was a direct Morid b'malchus charge against Yoav himself. So far, the nusach of the Gemara was that Yoav was a pretty bad guy. But now the Gemara introduces another opinion, and the Gemara tells us that it's possible to look at Yoav in a different light. So let's see where the Gemara starts over here. Upliga the Rav Abba Bar Kahana, the Omer of Abba Bar Kahana. Really, David and Yoav worked hand in hand, and they complemented each other. Ilmali David also Yoav milchama. If it wasn't for the Torah that David was Isaac so Isaac b'Torah Rashi, also Yoav milchama. Yoav could never have succeeded in the milchama. Avos chusay shel David imedest lo Yoav. The chusay Torah of David stood for Yoav b'milchamosav shel David. So Vibal David was learning Torah. That chus gave Yoav the power to triumph in his wars on behalf of David HaMelech. Yoav lo yasak David b'Torah. And if it wasn't for the fact that Yoav was taking care of the battlefront, that freed up David to learn, David would not have been able to learn. And the Yoav and Tzruya ala tzava. And we dash Matam David also Mishpat and Tzedakah l'chol amoy. Why was David able to focus on Mishpat and Tzedakah for his nation? Mishum di Yoav ala tzava. And it was a reciprocal relationship. Umatam Yoav ala tzava. And why was Yoav able to succeed in war? Mishum di David also Mishpat and Tzedakah l'chol amoy. Which is very much as to what's going on today in Eretz Yisrael. Although not everybody appreciates the importance of both sides. Without a component of Klal Yisrael learning Torah, we couldn't possibly have any success in our wars, but that doesn't mean we don't need any soldiers. We need soldiers as well. Vayetze Yoav, Meim David, Vayishlach Malachim, Acharei Avner. Yoav left David, and he sent messengers to Avner because he wanted to kill him. Vayeshivu Isai mi bar Hasira. He returned Avner from the bar Hasira. What is this bar Hasira? My bar Hasira. Amar Abba Bakana. It means bar Visira, a bar and a thorn Gormu Loila Abner Hareg is what caused Abner to get killed. And Rashi elaborates with two stories. There was a time where David was being pursued by Shaul, and Abner was with Shaul, and David snuck in to an area where Shaul was sleeping, and he could have easily killed Shaul at the time, and instead he just took a jug of water, sort of to tell Shaul, you see, you were vulnerable, I got your jug of water, I could have killed you, but I didn't. Now, when Shaul woke up and saw what was going on, that the water was missing, Abner should have told Shaul, look, David could have killed you. He had an opportunity to kill you, but he didn't. So why are you being right of David? You should stop being right of him. That's what Abner should have said. You know what he said instead? He said, maybe someone gave David the water. Maybe someone gave it to David, or and that's why the water's missing. So Abner had an opportunity to show Shaul that David wasn't the enemy, and he didn't do that. That's one reason why he was killed. And the case of Sirah was David once slid into the camp of Shaul and cut the knaf me'ilai, the collar of Shaul's beged. Again, when Shaul woke up, Abner should have said, look, David could have killed you again. He had a second opportunity to kill you, and he didn't. He's not the enemy. Don't be right of him anymore. But that's not what Abner said. What Abner said, you probably got caught on a branch somewhere. You didn't notice. So Abner had two opportunities where he could have been truthful and supported David and chose not to. It's for that reason why Abner was killed. So we don't know what these words mean. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shadanu Din Sanhedrin. So Toich Hashar is referring to the shar that refers to Bezdin, and they paskined on him like a Sanhedrin. And Amar Lei, they asked Abner, my time of katlase la Asael. Why did you kill Asael? So Abner answered, what do you mean? Asael roidif haya. He was a roidif. I'm allowed to kill a roidif. So they told him, why did you have to kill Asael? You could have just injured him in one of his limbs. So Abner says, Lo yachilei. How do you expect me to have such perfect aim and such precision to do that? So they told him back, that's nonsense. You so precisely attacked the precise place that was fatal. You're telling me you wouldn't have been able to injure him and not kill him? So Abner was condemned over that. And Ledaber Itai Shelley, what does that mean? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, it's al Iskai Shaloi. What is Iskai Shaloi? Rashi tells us something very interesting. Shaloi is referring to the lashon of Shal Na'alcha, take off your shoe, referring to Chalitza. And what Yoav asked Abner was, he says, Lama Redden and learn. Tell me, if a woman doesn't have hands, how would she be able to do Chalitza? So he says, oh, that's simple, let me show you. And he bent down, and with his mouth, he was going to untie the shoestrings to demonstrate how the chalitzas hanal could be done. Now, when he's bending down, pulling someone's shoestrings, he's in a very, very exposed position. He's in a very vulnerable position, and it's precisely in that position where Yoav was able to kill Avner. So that's what it means. B'shali, by discussing the Indian of Chalitza. That's a Rashi. Other Rishonim have a different opinion. And Yoav killed Avner in the same place. He wounded him in the same place that Avner killed Asael. By that exact place where a blow is fatal. Then the pasuk says regarding Yoav being killed, Hashem Hashem punished Yoav by his blood being spilled to make up for the blood that he spilled. Because Yoav killed two people that were greater they were tzaddikim and they're greater people than him. What does it mean? Both tzaddikim and toivim, they refer to something specific. Toivim shoyu dorshan achin v'reikin v'huloi dorash. Remember, Amasa we said, had a right to delay carrying out of David's orders because of Bittul Torah, and Rak Chazak Vamatz tells you that you don't have to listen to the king if it's a question of Bittul Torah. So we know there that Amosa darshaned Chazak Vamatz, Rak. But where do you see that Abner did that? So Rashi tells us when Shaul wanted to kill Noiv Irak Kohanim, he held back. Abner held back and didn't listen to Shaul. As Rashi says, Avner Kishamar lo Shaul avodav soivu v'himisus kahane Hashem. It says v'lo avu avdei Shaul l'shloich yodam v'lovkoy, and that was referring to Avner. He refused an order from the king because he didn't want to do what was the wrong thing, and that was to kill Noiv Irak Kohanim. But on the other hand, Yoav didn't darshan ach v'rak. Where should he have? Where he should have had was when he was instructed to kill Uriah by David HaMelech. He should not have killed Uriah Hachiti. He should have darshaned it, and he didn't. So that's why they were toivim imenu, because they darshaned the ach and rak, and they didn't accept a command from the king when it was not right, and he didn't do that. That was number one. And tzadikim shehein bepeh v'lo yasu. Avner and Amasa were both directly commanded face to face from the king, and they ignored an order. That's a very serious violation if it wasn't for the fact that they had the Torah backing them. But he was never directly told by David HaMelech to kill Uriah. Rather, it was just sent him in a letter. V'hu be'igeres also. So not only did he follow the king's orders when he shouldn't have, it wasn't even a direct order, it was through a letter. So that's why they were both Toivim and Tzadikim imenu. Now, how did Avner kill Amasa? I'm sorry, how did Yoav kill Amasa? Lo nishmar b'cherev asher b'yad. Yoav, he wasn't careful from the cherev that Yoav had because he fully trusted Yoav and he didn't have an inkling that Yoav wanted to kill him. Amarav shaloi chashta. Now, after Yoav was killed, the pasuk says, "Vayikaver b'veisoi b'midbar." He was buried in his house in the midbar. Frank the Gemara, Atu Beisai Midbaru, a house is inhabited. It's not a midbar. So why are we referring to his house as a midbar? Amar B'Yehuda Amarav, Kim midbar. Ma midbar mufkar lakoil. Just like the midbars of Rishus Harabim, anybody can come and go and pass by. In this midbar, Av Beisha Shal Yoav, Yoav's house was open to any nitzrach, anyone who needed a place to stay, a place to eat, needed anything. Yoav's house was always opened. Mufkar lakoil dovar. I'm sorry, mufkar lakoil, comma. Dovar achar kemidbar. Ma midbar menuka migezel varayis. Just like in the midbar, there's no gezel and there's no arayis. I'm going to assume it's because there's no one to steal from and there's no one to be mizana with. It's the middle of nowhere. Av beis shel Yoav menuka migezel varayis. His house was holy and pure. The Yoav yichya eshar ir. The pasuk says Yoav gave life to the rest of the city. We darshan Amar Yehuda afilu munini v'tzachanta, even if he had little treats, little nash. Rashi says dog and katanim, small fish, different types of delicacies. If he had little candies or whatever, he would never keep him for himself. He would always tell him paraslu. He would always, if he was eating, whenever he was tasting anything or eating any little food, whatever it was, paraslu, he always shared it with those around him. So we're seeing that Yoav was a very chashuv a mensch, but he had to be killed because that was David's tzivui. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we were zoicha to finish Nigmar Hadin. So we were Nigmar Hadin. And B'lineder Hadin Alach Nigmar Hadin, B'lineder Hadin Alach Nigmar Hadin, B'lineder Hadin Alach Nigmar Hadin. And now we are going to start the seventh parak Arba Misois, which is Mem Testament Beis, which is still yesterday's daf. So I'm going to try to brush things a little bit so that we could catch up. Arba Misois Nimtzru LeBezdin. There were 4 Misois that Bezdin are supposed to execute, each one at the proper time. Skila, Sreifa, Hereg, V'chenek. And we're going to soon see that these are in order of their chaymer. Skila, Sreifa, Hereg, V'chenek, and the nafkamina is very simple. If someone did an averis or did multiple averis, and he's liable for multiple misois, cannot kill anybody more than once, you have to give him the misa chamura. So that's why our Mishnah is telling us the order of chaymer Skila Shreifa Hereg V'chen. Rabbi Shimon Omer, that's not the way it is. Shreifa is the most chomer, Skila is the second, Chenek is the third, and the Hereg is the fourth. Zu mitzvahs haneskol. Zu mitzvahs haneskol is a new phrase. It's not related to the first half of this Mishnah. Zu mitzvahs haneskol is going back to what we learned in the last parak. We learned exactly what the process was when someone was getting skila. Right? We already learned. They take him to the base of skila, and there's someone waving, and they put him on a 2-story building. So we learned exactly how skila works, and the next Mishnahs are going to discuss how the other Mises Bezdins worked. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Tzchora, Amar Rav Huna. Kol mokim sheshanu chachamim derech derech minyan. Whenever the Mishnah lists something off, as it does in our Mishnah, arba misais, so it's listing off a count, ein muktam uma'ucher. Never is the order of how they're listed in the Mishnah relevant to halacha, except hutz mishiva samon. So basically, what Rav Tzchora is saying in reference to our Mishnah is that the order skila shreifa hereg v'chenek might not be dafka. Right? When we learned the Mishnah a moment ago, we said it's very dafka, and that skila is the most chomer. But Rav Tzchora seems to say there's only one place in Shas where the Mishnah lists off a number of items where its sequence is precise. And where is that? That Shiva Samonim. Shiva Samonim is, what if you have a beged with a stain that looks like it's blood? Now, if it is blood, then this beged is tummy. But if it's some type of dye or ink, of course, the beged is not tummy. How can you discern if this stain is blood or if it's some other type of stain? The teretz is, Chazal taught us that there's a very specific sequence of detergents that you apply to this stain. And if you apply the sequence of detergents to the stain in exactly as prescribed in the Mishnah, then if this is actually blood, it will dissolve and the stain will be removed. And if you apply this exact sequence and the stain remains, it's a clear sign that this is not blood, it's something else. And then the beged would be tar. And what is the sequence? As follows. The Tanan we learned. Shiva samonim avirun ala kesem. There are 7 detergents that you put on a stain that looks like it's blood in a very specific order. They cannot be applied together. They cannot be applied out of order. It's sequential. So let's go through these detergents. I've never seen any of these packaged on the shelf in the supermarket.
These the idea of tuma must be just from a dead person, not from a live person, right?
I think it's referring to nida, dam nida.
Nida. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Right. Rashi's laboitkoi im dam nidahu. That's what we're checking. So roig tofel. Roig tofel is saliva from first thing in the morning from someone who hasn't eaten anything. So it's what we call mummy breath saliva. Okay. Then comes megrisim. I guess it's Rashi says it's the water that you soaked grease and shapul, some type of peas in. And what you do with it, Rashi says, is you chew it and then you rub it on these stains. And then umei raglayim. And Rashi, this is not stam mei raglayim. This is mei raglayim that sat out a couple of days that have a stench that you can't survive with. That's smelly and rotten. That's the third simon. The neser uburis. There's neser, there's buris. I don't know exactly what the English translation for these items are, but I don't think I've ever found them on a supermarket shelf. There's kumulya and ba'ashling. So they have to be applied exactly in this way. Rashi just gives us a little bit of an indication of what they are. Neser is some type of earth, and buris is some type of grass, and kumulya is shluf dutz. I don't know what that is, but Rashi says I don't need to know. And ashlag you find in the holes of gems that you find in the yam. Again, I'm not sure what all these things are, but if you apply these in a specific sequence and it's dam nida, the stain will go away. Zakti brayse v'katani sefa havirin shaloik yasidron. What if you apply these detergents not in the precise prescribed order, or you apply them all together, they have no impact, and the fact that the stain didn't come out doesn't prove that it was not done. So that is what Rab Schoira is referring to. This is the only place where the order is ma'akev, but everywhere else where there's a minyan, it's not dafka that order. But Rav Papa Sava Mishmei de Rav Amar Af Arba Misais. Our Mishnah also, its order is dafka exact. That skilo is the most chomer and chenek is the most kill according to the Tanakama, and the proof is in the pudding. From the fact that Reb Shimon is arguing on the order, clearly the order is very dafka. Shema mino dafka katani. So the problem is, why didn't Reb Schoyer say that? How could Reb Schoyer debate that? How could Reb Schoyer claim that it's not an order? It's clear from Mishnah that it is an order. Reb Schoyer isn't referring to Mishnahs that list items that have a machloikis about them, such as our Mishnah. So if Reb Schoyer agrees that our Mishnah is dafka, but it's not included in his comments because his comments are only including Mishnahs that have a minyan that there's no machloikis about. Rav Papa Amar, Rav Papa expands it further. It says Af Seder Yuma. Even the Mishnahs in Yuma that tells us the order of how the avodas were done on Yom Kippur, that's also b'dafka in order. So he's including into the list now three things: the Samamonim, our Mishnah, and the Mishnah Yuma. Those are all b'dafka in order. Itnan milun kol ma'isa yom kippurim ha'amurim ala seder. All of the avodas of Yom Kippur im hit ma'isa lechaveirei le'asav leiklo. So the question is, why did the Frierdik Amarim that we quoted, why don't they say this is a minyan that's dafka? It seems very much like it is. When we're talking about that the sequence has to be the right sequence, that's because each one of them is different than the other and is more chomer than the other. For instance, in the case of the detergent, each detergent has to be applied in a very specific order, otherwise it won't work. Or by skila, shreifa, herek, v'chenek, the reason why skila is before the shreifa is because skila is more chomer. There's something about skila that's more chomer than shreifa. There's something about shreifa that's more chomer than herek. And there's something about herek that's more chomer than chenek. But the avodah of Yom Kippur, there's no reason why this avodah needs to be before that avodah. There's nothing specific about each of these avodas that places them in that specific order. It's just because of the Gzeres HaKosov that this is how you have to do things. And that's what the Gemara means by Chumer Ba'alma. It's a Chumer Ba'alma meaning because this is how the Torah wants it to be done at the Gzeres HaKosov. But there's nothing in the avodah itself that places one avodah as number one and the second avodah as number two. There's nothing specific about the avodas that places them in that specific order. And that's not what we're referring to. We're only referring to Mishnayos that the order is Nageya, based on the actual components that they belong in their specific place in the sequence. The Mishnah that talks about how they were makrim the korban tamid and the order of how they did it, the katani Allah zeu seder tamid. Why does everybody don't include that? Because ahula mitzvah ba'alma. Not only is it not a chumrah that the Torah mandates, even there it's only a mitzvah ba'alma, and if it was done out of order, it would be good anyway. So what does everybody agree? What does everybody agree is a case of a minyan that has a logical sequence that nevertheless doesn't have to be done in the right sequence. Ulafuke mi mitzvahs chalitza. The Mishnah that discusses the mitzvahs chalitza sets out the order of how are things done in a logical step-by-step order. Nevertheless, that order is not ma'akiv. It's not mitzvahs chalitza. Bahu v'yevem toi lefnei bezdin. The brother-in-law and the almana go to bezdin. Bezdin would give him an Eitzah Haiganis, which Rashi explains that if they're the same age, yeah, it makes sense that they should marry each other. But if he's very old and she's very young, or vice versa, they tell him this is not a good idea for either of you. This is not going to end well. Shenemar says in the pasuk, "V'kari lo zikne irei v'dibru elov." Then he Imeris, she then says, May ein Yavami. My Yavami refuses to do Yibam. But who I'm her, and he responds, she's correct. I don't want to take her. It had to be said, Dafkin Lashon HaKodesh. And then V'niksa Yevimto Elav La'ene as a Canaan. Then the Yavama approaches the brother-in-law. The Cholta Na'ala, she takes off his shoe. V'yarka B'fanav, and she spits in front of him, Roik Hanir L'dayanim. It has to be a big clump of roik, so it's very visible coming out of her mouth that she's spitting. The Ansav Amra, and then she declares, Kacha Yayasa Le'ish. V'nikra Shmoy B'Yisrael. The Amr Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda commented on this Mishnah, a very seemingly redundant comment. He said, Mitzvahs Chalitza, the order of operation of a Mitzvahs Chalitza, is Kairah. Kairah refers to her saying Me'en Yavami. Kairei is him responding Le'chafati L'kachta. Chayletes, she takes off his shoe. The Raikekesh, and she spits. The Kairah, and she declares once again, the Ansav Amra Kacha Yayasalish. So the Gemara asks, why would Rabbi Yehuda just repeat what the Mishnah said a moment ago? My Kamash Malon must nisani. Zog to Gemara, how Kamash Malon, you know what Rabbi Yehuda is trying to tell us? That it's mitzvah hachi. That's lechatchila the mitzvah. But but if you do this sequence out of order, less lanba, it would still work. Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a bride that supports this comment. Bein shehiktim chalitza l'rekika. Say if the chalitza was before the rekika, or rekika l'chalitza, it'll still be a kasher chalitza masha asa. So when Reb Tzchayra said that the only place where a Mishnah lists off something that it's in order and it's dafka is by the detergents, but not by chalitza. Chalitza, the order is not ma'akiv, even though there is sort of a logical progression from one step to the next, it's not ma'akiv. And there's another case where the Mishnah lists off a sequence that's not ma'akiv as well. A Kohen Gadol has 8 begodim, the Hedjit Barba, and the Kohen Hedjit wears 4 begodim. What are the 4 begodim? Ksainas, his shirt, Mitafes, and Moshe Alei, and Kohen Gadol, the Kohen Gadol has additional begodim, Choshen, ve'ephod, ume'il v'tzitz. V'tanya we learned, Minayin shelo yehei davar kodim l'michnasayim. How do you know that the very first article of clothing that a kohen puts on when he dresses in the morning, how do you know it's the michnasayim? Even though the Mishnah lists it off as ksoines michnasayim, it's nefesh v'avneit, you don't put on the ksoines first. The michnasayim gets put on first. Shenemar u'michnasei bad yu al bisoroi, and Rashi tells us al basori means you should put it on his skin when there is nothing else on his skin yet. So clearly you have to put on the michnasayim first. Yet the Mishnah, when it lists off the begodim, it doesn't list it off in that order. Rather, it lists off kesoinius first. Utana my time aktemelek. Why would the Tana place kesoinius first if in fact it's the michnasayim that are put on first? Mishum the aktemekra, because the Torah, when it lists off the begodim, the Torah also starts with kesoinius bad yilbosh. The Torah introduces the kesoinius first. But why would the Torah do that if it's not the order in which it's worn? Ukra my time akteme. Because the beged that covers his whole body, not just from the waist and down, is the beged that the Torah wants to list first, and the ksoinis is what covers his whole body, not just a t-shirt. It goes down to the floor, so that's why the Torah listed first. But the first article of clothing that's actually put on is the michnasai. Okay, so that tells us why our Mishnah is in order, but it's subject to a machlokes, and we know the detergents are in order, and we know Yom Kippur avoid is in order, but that's because of the chumrah. The rest of them, the order is not ma'akiv, beside the dressing of the kohen, and that he wears his michnasayim first rather than the ksoinis first, and sai chalitza does not have to be done exactly according to the order. Okay, now the Gemara spends a lot of time in understanding why there is this sequence of chomer. How do we know school is the most chomer? How do we know second is shreifa? How do we know third is hereg? And how do we know fourth is chenek? And then the Gemara is going to want to know, according to Reb Shimon, how does he know his sequence? So let's start. Skila shreifa. Skila chamura misreifa. How do we know skila is more chomer than shreifa? Now, logic as to how we perceive what's more severe, that's not at all in the cards over here to be discussed, because the Gemara is strictly focused on the raya from the Torah, what's more chomer, not because of our assessment of what we think is a more severe miso. And the Meforshim always tell us that the Torah is a greater raya than the Metzias is. So let's see what the Gemara figures out over here. How do we know skila is the most chomer? Shekei nitna l'megadev. What misa did the Torah offer up to a megadev? Skila and la'ovid avodah zara. So, frank the Gemara, what makes that so chomer? My chomer. Why is that the reason why skila is severe? Because it applies to a megadev and an la'ovid avodah zara. So, up to Gemara, the obvious for shekei poishid yadai beikar. I mean, what worse severe could there be than being a kofer beikar? And that's the oynish. Skila was the oynish given to him. Clearly, that must be the most severe. Frank Gemara, no, I'll show you a different perspective. Adirabba, Sreifa Chamura. Maybe the mitzvah, the Misa Sreifa is the more severe. Shekei Nikna Lebas Koin Shezinsa. A Bas Koin who's Mizana. She gets that. And that's a very severe Avera. You know why? Umay Chumra. Shekei Mechalelas Sevilla. She's totally deriding and diminishing and demeaning her family. And Rashi quotes a Gemara later that says people are going to say, this is a holy family. Look what a horrible family they are. Look what type of daughter they raised. Look what type of influence they were. That's even more demeaning. That's horrible. And maybe that makes that the worst. Now, Rashi is going to tell us that the answer to that question ultimately is yes, as disrespectful, as demeaning, and as hurtful it is to the family, but nothing compares to being a kaifer baker, and surely that is the worst aveira, and therefore skila, which is given for that aveira, is the most chomer. What? Then what? Well, I guess we don't appreciate how bad it is when you hurt the family. But the Gemara has a different twist, which Rashi tells us is a common, but it's not the real reason for it. So Kasavi Rabbanon Nesua Yotzei. So it is but not Nesuin, and she was Mizana. The halacha is she gets skila, right? It's a very severe form of misa. That's one halacha that we know. So if a woman, a regular Bas Yisrael, is an Ira HaMe'urasa and she's Mizana, she gets skila. Once she's married and she's a Nesua, she no longer gets skila. Her misa gets downgraded to chenek. And Rashi actually adds a little bit of insight as to why that would be. Why is it a bigger avera for her to be mizana when she's in a rusa, and therefore she gets skila, rather than if she's mizana when she's in the nesua, she only gets chenek? So Rashi gives us some insight, and that is when she's in a rusa, she's still living in her father's home. So it's a great slight and bizoyin to her father. This is who you raised. That's why she gets skila. It's not for this nus, it's for the bizoyin that she does to her family. Once she's in the suah, so she's not under the influence of her family anymore. She's under the influence of her husband. So it's not as big of an avera to shed bad light on her husband as it is on their father's household.
Or greater than the actual act itself.
That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like, yeah. Now, that is the halacha of a Bas Yisrael. Now, the Torah says a Bas Koyin, Kiseichel is nice. A Bas Koyin who does nus, she gets sreifa. Now, is sreifa or is it? So the Rabbanan hold that you know what type of Bas Koyin gets sreifa? Only if it's a Bas Koyin that was zinsa after Nesuin. So had she been a Yisraelis, the Misa would have only been Chenek. The Balchi's a Bas Koyin, it's going to be Sreifa. But a Bas Koyin who's Mezana as an Arusa, she still gets Skila. So that clearly shows that Skila is more Chomer, because she only gets Sreifa when Sreifa is more Chomer than what a Bas Yisrael would have gotten. But she doesn't get Sreifa if Sreifa is less Chomer than what a Bas Yisrael would get. So Kasavi Rabbanan, our Rabbanan hold that Nesua Yoitza L'Sreifa. What type of Bas Koyin gets Sreifa? Only if she's a Nesua and if it wasn't a kohen, she would have gotten chenek. But v'loy arusa, a bas kohen who's an arusa, who even the bas Yisrael gets skila, the bas kohen doesn't get a break and downgrade to shreifa, she will also get skila. Umida avka rachmana la arusa beskila. Since an arusa bas kohen shezinsa gets skila, and a nesua bas kohen gets shreifa, shmami no skila chamura. That would be an indication that skila is more chamer. Now, the reason why I said this isn't really the reason is because the Torah doesn't say beferish that the arusa is beskila by a bas kohen. That's just how the Rabbanan learn. So it's a byproduct of the svara that ultimately the raya is because there's nothing more chomer than being a koifer beikar, and that is given the misa of skila. Now, how do we know skila is chamur misayif? We've proven quite well that skila is more chomer than sreifa. How do we know skila is more chomer than hereg? Shekain nitna l'megadef, the same svara that we said. Shekain nitna l'megadef u'lo'ovid avoidus kechav. Umay chomer kedamoran that you're a koifer beikar. Frank the Gemara, adrabah. Sayif chomer, I'll show you in a way where Sayif is more chomer. Why? Who gets the misa of Sayif? Shekenitin le'anshe ir hanidachas. People in the ir hanidachas get killed with a sword. That's also a koifer beikar, right? So you see, maybe that hereg is the more chomer dika misa. Umay chomer. Why is ir hanidachas even more chomer? Why would you think that's even more chomer than even avodah zarah? Shekein mamoina novad. Someone who does avodah zarah, his money goes to his Yershim. But someone who's a member of an Ir Nidachas, his money gets destroyed too. So you see, it's even more severe than even regular avodah zarah. Amr Dr. Gemara, no. In your opinion, what do you think is a worse avera? Koyach hamadiach, the person who convinced everybody else to do avodah zarah, or koyach hanida, or a regular member of the Ir Nidachas who didn't influence anybody else, but he was influenced to avodah zarah. Logically, who should get the worse avera? I would say the madiach, the guy who influenced others. Now, in an Ir Nidachas, there's going to be a lot of people who just did it because they were influenced, but there's always going to be ringleaders, right? The ringleaders don't get the same misa as everybody else. With Tanya, we learned, Madiche Ir Nidachas, the ringleaders, they get skila. So you see clearly that if the ringleaders get skila, and just the regular Oivdei Avodah Zarah get hereg, it must be skila is more severe. Okay, now skila chamur mi chenek. How do we know skila is more chamer than chenek? Repeating the same svara again, because it's applied to that they are koy from the ikr. More adarabba, chenek chomer. I'll show you how chenek is more chomer. You know who gets chenek? Somebody who hits his father and mother is killed with mitzvahs chenek. Umay chomer. Why would that be more chomer than avodah zarah? Shekein hukish kvoidon lechavar amokin. I'm just so amazed how the Gemara considers it a good taina that Kadosh Baruch Hu gives such respect to parents, even equating them with himself. That's that we have in the Gemara that would make it even more chomer than avodah zarah itself, disrespecting parents. Zog the Gemara, mida'avke rachmana la rusa bas Yisrael mechlal nesua bas Yisrael mechenek l'skila. We said that a Bas Kohen, who's Mizana, and she's a Nesua, if she was a Bas Yisrael, she would get Chenek. But if she's a Bas Kohen, she gets Reifa. So that clearly says, I'm sorry, Mida'avka Rachmana la Rusa Bas Yisrael, Machalal Nesua Bas Yisrael, since an Arusa Bas Yisrael gets Skila, and an Nesuya Bas Yisrael gets Chenek, right? So the Arusa is switched over from Chenek to Skila. Shemamina skila chamura. It must be skila is more chamer because a regular noyef gets chenek. A noyefes who's an arusa who's hurting her parent as well, she gets skila. So clearly skila is more chamer than chenek. Beautiful. Now we're going to look at shreifa. What's that?
Why is the design of the Kohen's father then more important than the design of his soul father?
It's not because by an arusa they both get skila. We said. Right? It's only by Nesua. So if anything, the Kohen is more severe because even if she's a Nesua, she gets Shreifa rather than Chenek. Shreifa Chamura Misayif. How do we know Shreifa is more Chamer than Herek? Zog to more Shekenitna Lebas Kohen Shazinsa. Because a Bas Kohen Shazinsa gets Shreifa. So that shows Shreifa is severe. Umay Chomer, why is that such a Chomer Dika thing? Shekain Mechaleles as Avia, because a Baskoin Shezinsa is humiliating her father's family. Fact Gemara, Adar Abasayev Chomer, maybe Hereg is more Chomer. Shekain Nitin le'anshir any dachas. Umay Chomer Shekain Mamonin Alvad. It's very severe because there, what's unique is that even their money gets destroyed. Zokt Gemara, Nemar Avia Beskila, v'Nemar Avia Besreifa. So this is no longer going to be a logical argument that we've always made up until now. This is going to be a Gzeir Shava. It says Avia when she gets skila by Anayim Urasa. V'Nemar Avia Besreifa. It talks about Avia when it talks about a Baskoyan who is Mizana. She's humiliating her father's family and she gets Shreifa. And we darshan Gzeir Shava from Avia to Avia. Ma Avia Amar Beskila. Just like Avia, that's in the pasuk of talking about Anayim Urasa getting skila, we say that skila is chamur misayif. Af avia hamur b'shreifa, shreifa chamur misayif. So how do we know that shreifa is more chamur than herek? Because we have exer shava from shreifa to skila, and just like skila, we've proven logically is more chamur than sayif. So because of exer shava, shreifa is more chamur than sayif as well. Now, this is an important piece of information, Rashi tells us. You know why? Because if you think about it, why did we have to go through this whole sequence all over again? Why Shreifa is more Chomer than everything else? If I know that, once I know that Shreifa is more Chomer than anything else, and I know Skila is more important than Shreifa, so all the Gemara should have said is why Shreifa is more Chomer than everything else, and then the Gemara could have said Skila is more Chomer than Shreifa, so automatically it's more Chomer than everything else, that Shreifa is more Chomer than. The teretz is because one of the chumras that Shreifa has, we only know it from Skila. So that's why Skila had to set its own set of chumras. Okay, Shreifa chamur michenek. How do we know Shreifa is more chamur than chenek? Shekei nitna levas koyin shezinsa. Shreifa is given to bas koyin shezinsa umay chumur kedamoran because she is mevaza her father's family. Like we said, so Gemara, no. No, Shreifa is still more chamer. You know why? Since the Torah tells us that a bas kohen who's mizana as a nesua gets a more chamer de kamisa than a regular bas Yisrael because she's upgraded from chenek to Shreifa. Clearly, Shreifa is more severe than Chenek. Shmami no Shreifa chamur. Beautiful. So now we've established how Skila is more chamur than all of them, and how Shreifa is more chamur than Hereg and Chenek. Now we're going to look at Hereg. How do we know it's more chamur than Chenek? Sayiv chamur mechenek shekenitan la'anshe ir hanidachas. Who gets Hereg? People who are members of an ir hanidachas. Umay chumra shekein mamonim avad, because in that misa their money gets destroyed as well. Because hukash kvoid hamokoib to the kavoid of the chayrov. So Gemara, this is the final answer. There's nothing more chamer than being a koifer baker, and someone who's a part of Atir Anidachas is a koifer in the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's more chamer than even someone being mevaza his parents, and that's why that's always the most chamer, which goes back to the very first thing we said, why Skila is more chomer than Shreifa. It's because Skila is given to an Oived of a Dezora and a Megadev, and Shreifa is only given to somebody who's Mavadas their parents, and nothing is more severe than being a Koifer Baker. Zok more weiter. Rab Shimon had a whole different set of order because he held Shreifa was more chomer than Skila. So what's Rab Shimon's makar that Shreifa is more chomer than Skila? Shreifa chamura miskila shekei nitna levas koyin shezinsa. Bas koyin who's mizana gets shreifa, and Reb Shimon learns that she gets it even if it's an arusa. So a regular arusa shezinsa gets skila, but a bas koyin arusa shezinsa gets shreifa. Umay chumra. What's the chumra of a bas koyin shezinsa? Shekein mechaleles esavia. Frank the Gemara adarabah. Skila chamura shekei nitna lemegade for the oived avodas kachavim. We know the onish for avodas zara is skila. Umay chomer shekei poished yada beikar. Dr. Mor Rab Shimon letamei. Rab Shimon holds that even a bas koyin who's an arusa doesn't get skila, she gets reifa. So that must be a chumrah. Reb Shimon Latamei Damar achas arusa v'achas nesua. A baskoyin, whether she's a nesua or even an arusa, who would otherwise get skila, yotza l'sreifa, she gets reifa. So it must be that Treifa is more chomer than Skilo, and we the Avkei Rachmana Larusa Bas Koyin, Mechlal Larusa Bas Yisrael, Miskilo L'Sreifa. Since the Torah says a Bas Koyin is more severe than the Bas Yisrael. A Bas Yisrael gets Skilo, but a Bas Koyin gets Sreifa, Mami no Sreifa Chamura. It must be that Sreifa is the most severe of Oinchim. Okay? Sreifa Chamura Michenek. How do we know that Sreifa is more chomer than Chenek? Shekei Nitna Levas Koyin Shezinsa. Because a Bas Koyin Shezinsa gets it the same svara that we've been repeating throughout. Umay chumra kidamaron, that she's mevaza her parents. Correct the more adarabba chenek chamor, maybe chenek is more chomer shekain nite lamake ava v'imoy umay chumra shekain hukash kfoidom lechavar amakoy. So violating your parents is worse. So to more midavka rachman l'nesua bas koyin mechalal nesua bas Yisrael. Mechenek l'sreifa. A bas Yisrael shezinsa gets chenek. A bas koyin shezinsa gets sreifa. So clearly, sreifa must be more chomer than chenek. Shemami no sreifa chamura. Now sreifa chamura misayif, because if you remember, Reb Shimon holds that hereg is the lowest. It's even after chenek. It's the easiest misa. So sreifa chamura misayif. How do we know that? Shekenitna levas koyin shezinsa. The same theme that we've been repeating, that she's mevaza her family's household. Clearly, hereg is very severe because it's given to Acha Yerni Dachas that lose their money as well. Going back to the story we said earlier, what logically is a worse avera? Koyach hamadiach, the influencer, someone who's influencing others to be kaiver beikar and to be oived about Yizara, or the people who were merely influenced and that's why they were oived about Yizara, turning over onto Nun Amid Beis. Haba Oimer, logic would dictate koyach hamadiach. It's surely a worse avera to be madiach somebody. So therefore, the kal v'chomer uma chenek. So let's have a look. Haba Oimer koyach madiach. Rab Shimon islay madiche irani dachas bechenek. Rab Shimon holds that the Mediche Irani Dachas get chenek. So we learned earlier that the Chachamim hold that the Mediche Irani Dachas, I think, get skila, right? But Rab Shimon holds, you know what the Mediche Irani Dachas, you know what the instigators get? They get chenek. So it must be that chenek is worse than hereg, because the influencers get chenek and the influenced only get hereg. V'kal v'chomer uma chenek shechomer misayif madi chenek, which is more chomer than herek, because we know that because the influencers get chenek instead of herek. Madi chenek shechomer misayif shreifa chamura mimenu. We have already demonstrated that shreifa is more chomer than chenek. We've demonstrated that already because of the bas koyin that gets shreifa instead of a bas Yisrael that gets chenek. So sayif hakal. Sayif, cher, which is even less chomer than chenek, lekoshkein surely is less chomer than sreifa. Okay, beautiful. Let's stop here, and we'll be mamshech tomorrow. So we're only an amud behind, so we're getting closer. We're catching up.